Welcome, everyone. I see at least 12 more people participating, so we will be slowly starting. And I will provide you with some introduction. So first of all, welcome. My name is Magdalena Żadkowska, and today we start with my friend and colleague and co-worker, Professor Natasza Kosakowska-Bezrezecka. We start a webinar or online workshop called Working with a Gender Perspective, Taking a Gender-Aware Approach to Research and Teaching. And while waiting for others, we want all of you know that there are some steps to be taken. So we have the agenda for today, and we would like to have 1 hour presentation, but you can always interact with us on chat, and there will be also some task to do during the presentation, and then we will have half an hour of Q&A. So we would like to provide you with our workshop on these 5 points. First point is called why it is risky not to build diverse and inclusive culture within academia. So we sum up here all our experiences while working as didactics, as scholars, and also under umbrella of Mind the JET projects that the webinar is designed for and established to as one of the dissemination point. And then we go straightly to research and teaching. So first of all, we would like to make you sure why it is important to work with a gender perspective in research and in teaching, and then to find some recommendations for both, for gendering research and gendering teaching. We divided with Natasza ourselves that one of us speaks more about research and the other about teaching, but in a way we would like also to invite you that for sure you are experts in at least one of the things, meaning research or teaching, to think about good practices, good questions, good advices, but also maybe difficult questions that might be helpful for all of us as the environment. So let's start with short presentation. As I said, my name is Magdalena Żadkowska and I work in the University of Gdańsk. For now, I'm on sabbatical leave, so I work more as a scholar, doing publishing and some mentoring. But in general, I'm involved both in didactic process, in researching process, in dissemination processes, and also to manage scientific teams. I said so not only to present myself, but also to focus, to make some focus, to give some focus on what will be the subject of today's meeting, because we will think how to put gender perspective in what we do in academic work and why it is important. So as the scholar, I'm more involved as sociologist in studying everyday life and relations between men and women, which again gives very quickly the research perspective. But working, for example, for Mind the JET project, I'm also aware about the situation of people, men and women, and thinking about the different diversity aspects of us working to develop the science. So this is also my goal. So I give the floor now to Natasza.
Thank you so much, Magda. And we miss you here at the University of Gdańsk because Magda indeed is in sabbatical. I'm a professor in social psychology and my focus is on gender and cross-cultural issues. And for the past 20 years, I've been supporting different organizations in creating an environment that is helpful in establishing inclusive working environment that allows people to really feel that they are safe and they're included. And also we are expected to perform highly. And in a way, we also have data that in terms of having very strong sense of belonging and safe and diverse or diversity-oriented culture, people are willing to engage more. And as a result, they do have more innovative outputs. And we're going to talk about it today. And this is part of my expertise. I work as a researcher, but I also work as an educator and an expert as well. And the content of this webinar today and what we're going to present to you is based on, well, years of expertise, but also lessons learned and failures made. So in a way, we want to share with you what we have come up with, and also we were inspired by other scholars in that field, also in the Mind the Jobs project as well. So it's a lesson learned experience for us all. And starting from the very beginning, when we talk about inclusive and diversity-oriented environment, mostly for the past 20 years, it has been linked with business areas of life. And only recently, academia has also given up this, let's say, more traditional approaches and are moving towards diversity inclusion management, because it boils down to not so simple equation. In a way, we want to work in a very exciting, inspiring, and innovative teams as researchers. And there are two very important conditions that need to be met. And when we talk about our work as researchers, it's also partly linked to teaching, but also to dissemination of our results. We have to think through the lens of two very important conditions. And when we're here presenting to you, I would like you, together with Magda, to think about your own working environment. Does it really meet those criteria? So first of all, people need to feel that they can be unique, whoever they are, whatever identities they carry along, and they need to feel that they can fully develop their talents to the extent, and here is the second condition, that they really feel that they belong to the working environment, academia, class, or a team or a lab, and that their voice is important and they have influence over it. So in a way, with my uniqueness, with my talents, I can develop them to such an extent that I can also feel I have influence over the working environment or the studying environment. So these are the two conditions for us as researchers, for us as managers in the academia, but also for us as teachers. Are we creating environments kind of fulfilling those two important human needs? And only then we can talk about people feeling included, so students, our colleagues, and others being included and belonging to the world of academia. And we also know that it links nicely with psychological safety, quality of life, innovation, higher performance, and people are voicing their opinions. So when you think about your research environment and your teaching environment, are people having these? In terms of like current reports, I really like with Magda to mention some of them that we are very much in a way more convinced by why is it important in the academic world as well. So when we think about the current workforce, not only concerning academia, but also global workforce, and when we look at talent, 75% this year will be the millennials, so 30 plus generations. And for at least half of them, we talk about millennials, here diversity inclusion as values are a very important part of their life, especially in the professional life. When we think about our students, we talk about Z generation, so 20 plus, who are also very much even more into feeling that the inclusion diversity is part of their everyday life and also part of their studies. Then when we look at other data, we do know that teams and groups that are gender and age and ethnically diverse, so here is the diversity element, they make better and more innovative decisions. So in a way, there are some data showing that there's a profit from creating atmosphere where diversity is present and it's also included. And thirdly, we do know from other research that gender diverse teams, they do tend to produce more novel and higher impact scientific ideas and outputs. So in a way, there is a really important innovative output coming from diversity when it's really nicely managed. But the problem is that when we talk about doing research, doing teaching, we also need to be aware of the fact that we need to prevent bias in research and teaching. So in a way, be able to create a space which really makes any people of any gender really feeling included. So speaking of this, can I ask for your attention? As Magda was signalizing, it's going to be an interactive workshop. We hope you will be involved in it. So we would like you to have a look at the three triangles here. And in a second, I will show you something in those triangles. And again, you can say your answers because I will have questions to it, or you can write your answers in chat. Can you tell me what is in those triangles? I will show you what's in the triangles, and then I will make it disappear. I will keep it for usually the time people read things, and then I'll ask you to reply in, orally or in chat. So I hope you're ready. We need your eyes focused on the screen. So here it goes. Okay. So coming back to the empty triangles, the question was what was in the first triangle, second triangle, third triangle, whatever, which one you have remembered. And also anybody who's present, you can write in chat or you can say it out loud. So, anybody saw anything in the first triangle? Oh, I said answer for the third one. Perfect. Any other?
Man at the door.
Perfect. Any other answers? How about the second one?
Cat on the roof.
Yeah,
on the
thank you,
roof.
Juliana. Yeah.
And we
Perfect.
have Paris in Spring, I think, from
Yes, for the
Alexandra.
third one.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, see, this is our interactive group. Thank you for being interactive. So let's come back to this. Like, I'm not changing the order. It's the same order. I can't do it on Zoom anyway. So this is the order we are following. So have a look again at those. So have we all spotted exactly what's written in those triangles? And probably now when you have give it a second glimpse, you can see that there is a double proposition, at, on, and in. And the thing is, this is beautiful act of attention, which actually is exactly as it should be, because we are avoiding and we are kind of not seeing the avoidant information, which is not necessary, this is totally okay. But we also know, and this is Daniel Kahneman, so he was our Nobel Prize winner in psychology. He once said that we are blind. We can be blind to the obvious, but we are also blind to our blindness. And the thing is that we do not notice some things, and we are very often not aware of the fact that automatically we can become victims of our own biases. And this is what this webinar is about. Like when we do research, when we do teaching, are we really aware of all the little things we can stumble upon, being wonderful people, wonderful human beings, but still being automatic in our thinking? Have a little example of how gender biases work. Here are some other numbers that concern gender in the workforce, not only in academia. Some of the examples of those figures here are related to academia, but not only. So have a look at them. Maybe you know some of them. And I will let you look at it for a second, and maybe some of you know what do they mean and how they reflect gender biases. But have a go together with me. So usually in the societies, when we look at it from the binary perspective, at least half of people in the society are women. And then when we look at the time they spend on work, then 390 minutes are spent by men, 290 minutes are spent by women. But then when you look at time spent on household duties and childcare, we can see that weekly 26 hours goes to women, 6.5 hours on average go to men. So there's a little disrepresentation of how much women and men work, mostly similarly. But then there is a big burden that is put on women when it comes to childcare and time spent on household duties. Then lower presence of women in the labor market, the more women are mothers, so the more children they have, the less present they are and the less they earn. By the way, you see that there is a 12.7% gender pay gap in the European Union. It also concerns academia. And 12% of women are, 12% directors in Europe are women. There's a 7 years longer to advanced academic career for women. And women and men scientific Nobel Prize winners in our world. Again, there is a big representation of men and not so much of women. And again, it's an example of gender bias because when we think about women and men, there's another beautiful study done by Hyde and others. So from psychological research, we know that women and men are more similar to each other than different. And 85% of different results are actually showing that there's a smaller difference in the way we function in the everyday and the everyday social life. But still, even though we are more similar, there is a system that fuels those biases. And at the end of the day, we don't act and we don't work the same way. And research and teaching is not free from those biases as well. So we need, as researchers and teachers and educators, really do something about it.
Okay, so let's start from some memories. So you can think now, like maybe close your eyes and think about the very, very common question when with Natasha, for example, we do the stationary training and we do the speed dating. So let's imagine that now there is this funny question happening to you that takes you back to your childhood, and think when you were a child, who you wanted to become. And of course, we remain here in the background and in the context of science. So for example, my children that are 24 and 28 this year, they were watching a lot of Dexter stories, and I think it might have influenced where they're living now or the choices that made. And of course, when we go into cartoons, we see a lot of stereotypes and a lot of different patterns that influence that. But also one thing we should remember, although we have like global cartoon networks, that we were also influenced a lot by different stories we were told. And I was also giving this question to me, why I am a scholar, why I am an academic, female academic, what might have influenced that? And I find one image, and this is on the next slide, the image of the comic that was famous in Poland. So Natasza, if you could give me the next slide, thank you. And it had a very strange and funny name, maybe Polish colleagues on the chat can remember. But in a way, it showed the very old white with also the hair and beard male professor, and the woman that was house, maybe not wife, but the person that was occupying a very practitioner way of the everyday life of the professor. And of course, in hidden, she was like one who was the invention, the novelty, and the ideas. So this is probably the image that influenced for me as a little girl in Poland, that maybe is not the same to be a scientist, or maybe I cannot be that professor, or maybe there are some differences for the world of men and women when we want to deal with scientific careers. For sure, it changed in many countries, and as we talk a lot with our colleagues from Southern Europe or from other continents or from Northern Europe, we also see some advantages of the context of Polish culture that was influenced by some equality and communism ideas that we probably, a lot of us saw, a lot of mothers or even grandmothers working in academia and having professors and professor as the title that was used. And we also do have, and this is the protagonist of the next slide, the Marie Curie, the common Nobel Prize winner, that is the one that appears on every study questionnaire we made in Poland, showing that, yes, among 3 common known scientists, we will say in one breath that there is Marie Curie Skłodowska. And also when we talked with, and we looked through different pedagogy studies made in Western Europe, we see that this is also the influencing role model for many men and women in other countries of Europe, because she won the Nobel Prize award twice. Of course, it has the other side, so it can be seen as the pattern, the role model that cannot be achieved. But we want, with Natasza, use the example of a known protagonist in science to also see what we are doing with these patterns, why we should support women. And I remember we, thanks to Professor Wojtkowska, who is also here with us, we were involved in the study of very talented women from L'Oreal Prize Award environment. And we saw a lot of barriers and a lot of social mechanisms playing against them when they were dealing with the career. So trying to be involved scholars and being also more experienced and older, we find out that there are some things that we can do as recommendation for all of us to start helping those who might feel, because of those cartoons, of those role models that are not that common, that the world of academia is not for all of us. Because our, as you, Natasza, said, our idea that everybody should feel that belongs starts with that everybody also might feel that the uniqueness is important, because this uniqueness gives us now the power of the science. So let's start to see the process, the idea to work with gendering. We have the free, also in Mind the Jet project, we have this free research publishing and teaching. But when we really go and look through it and very deeply into it, we might see that this is not a linear process, that this is the approach that makes it all, that it always one influencing the others. When we start to teach children in school, we also use books, we use the different articles, we use publishing, and the publishing and the articles and the books are based on research. So this is always like kind of circle, not linear process that might be seen. Also, we try to make the model of it, and this is on the next slide. So remember, now we will like split into more research and more teaching. That it's never thinking only about one of the things alone. So let's start with research. Why and how to gender the research. We will also give you some links and QR codes in the end to our products of the Mind the Jet, which are like guidelines for gendering, research, teaching, and publishing. And today we talk about one of them, which is research and teaching. So recommendations for gendering research are mainly 5. First of all, it's about including sex and gender in your research idea space. Then it is to think about gender sensitiveness in proposal writing. Then third, it is to implement sex and gender within your research. Then fourth, it's about dissemination phase. And fifth, it is about in general, some things, how to be gender-aware researchers. And now let's go slowly one by one to see some examples and good practices. So we can find a lot of different projects. Sometimes as social scientists, like me and Natasza, we just study people. So in this kind of disciplines, it's like maybe easier to think, yes, am I asking questions about men? Am I asking questions about women? Isn't that I maybe do use some stereotypes? For me, the research that you see on the slide was kind of breaking stereotypes, because the outcome is that, did you know that women living alone are those that waste the most food? Maybe we would have the other hypothesis to this question, but only asking the questions about men and women. And even in social science, we do not do it very often. For last 3 months, I was the fellow in Fernand Broidel Fellowship in Florence, and there were many quantitative studies presented, many wonderful PhD thesis presented, and in many of them there was like the general idea to study people, not going more into this very specific differences. And one of those is gender. If we ask the question about gender, you can find some checklists and some notes. Remember to ask about gender in the checklist we will give to you, or you can read in our publications. Then for sure, once a while, you will find some extra important outcomes, as there are on the next slide in the other research that is going into more like STEM studies. For example, when we think and talk and study cars and transportation, we see that men are more likely than women to be involved in car accidents. So they dominate the number of people seriously injured. But when a woman is involved in a car accident, she is 47% more likely to be seriously injured and 71% more likely to be moderated injured, even when researchers control for factors such as height, weight, seatbelt use, and accident severity. This is also very interesting and kind of threatening, that 70% more likely she is to die. And it is all has to do with how the car is designed and for whom. So it's a very new thing that cars now take the perspective of the person that is different than 180 centimeters and 80 kilo a person that is driving the car, that there are other people in the car when the car is driving, and the car should be safe for all of us, as the science should work for all of us. With the second recommendation, how to write the gender-sensitive proposal, it is important to know that we can miss or avoid gender in hypothesis or in objective. And very often we also should see the social and historical context where the study was done. So it's not only that, for example, biologists or physicians would say, we do not bother gender. If they come from the country with the history and culture, if they, as scholars and researchers, present certain threats like gender, age, and we know that the answer is yes, if they do have family or not, this is already to take in consideration that the gender perspective should be taken. And when writing proposals, we also work a lot with references, with bibliography. And for example, this is very fresh study from Nature, 1 year old only, that citations show gender bias, and the reasons are surprising. Gender biases in paper citations, of course, that are less common among young scientists, but it still plays a part in making women's researchers less visible. And then there is also the language that is involved. For example, English language avoids or make us forget the gender of the authors of the papers because the endings are not that seen. In the Slavic languages, we more often show the gender of the author. So all moments when we see that diverse people coming from diverse countries in diverse age are producing science, we get more knowledge about it, that scholars and academics are diverse. The third recommendation is about implementing sex gender within your research. And there is wonderful Swedish webpage. And if you scan the QR code that is here, you can find thousands of, maybe not thousands, but many examples when gender is making a difference, and also those when gender is not making a difference, to read, to go deeply with the discipline you are presenting, or also to use it when you work with students. So please follow the webpage and have more examples. We do not have now time to share, but I hope you will find some to read through. We can send the QR code also again, but I hope you could scan. Then there is the next. Thank you, Natasza, for next slide. Then there is the next very important part of the study. Sometimes if we are more involved in only like designing process, and while the study is done, we are already in the next project, we forgot about it. But disseminating knowledge is very important. And we can use now many European wonderful projects to know that it's good to disseminate knowledge and our outcomes within like groups, like with diverse groups for children, also noting the gender difference, and do it more in comics way or visiting elementary schools. But we can also work with politicians, and this is really tough and difficult group because the gender sensitivity there, I would say that they would really should do more workshops over there. So whether you deal with supervisors, or you deal with sponsors, or you deal with ministries or governments, it's also very important to prepare yourself that gender is important thing. And then there are also language, and I know, Natasza, you will also take over language when talking about teaching, but the language we present and the language of the science that the study is presented is very important to see and to remember about gender difference and about showing and breaking the stereotypes of gender. And then in the end, we are all researchers. And nowadays, with the word intersectionality, we also very often talk about positionality of us as researchers. So the first part of the quotation, that who am I is unique, should be also taken into understanding and into consideration that it is very important to know who are we. For example, me being a mother, having like almost 50 years old, being white, being a woman, coming from social sciences, speaking Polish as original language, being a part of certain community or having certain values always influence the way I do my studies, always influence the way I conduct the classes, always influence the way that I conduct research, and I should be aware of that. So it's always very good to think about me, and that's why I was showing the examples from my childhood and thinking about the way young people, the other generation, and as you, Natasha, said, we are like now sharing different perspectives, being the other generations than our students nowadays. It also shows us that to move on with science and to be more understood and to work in diverse teams, it's important to be sure who are we, and this is our role in a way to design the role of the scholar and to be responsible for science and for its development.
Thank you, Magda. And moving on to the next part. So we talked about doing the research, and we will talk about teaching now. And in terms of teaching, it's also important that we think of who is doing the teaching and what the person is teaching. And then to regard the positionality Magda were mentioning, it's very important that sometimes, especially in our field time, social psychologists, and I do gender, very often the majority of teachers in gender are women. So it's also like a single perspective here, but I will come back to it in a second. Then when we think about gendering teaching and being sensitive to those matters, let's start from the very beginning. When we think about, for example, what do we teach? So here are some pictures from anatomy textbooks. And as you can see, most of the shapes and most of the silhouettes are here male. So one of the important aspects here when we do the teaching concerns that the fact that students, for example, studying medical sciences or medicine, when they prepare for the anatomy exams, they may have more exposure to illustrations of the male rather than female body during their training. As a result, we do have the context of gender-based imaginary from anatomy textbooks, and they do later have an effect on implicit and also explicit gender attitudes. Have a look how it works. So, for example, when we think about gender bias, we do know that it's very prevalent and it's associated with healthcare disparities. And let me give a very precise example. So when we look at female and male physicians, women are more likely than men to have their reports of pain to be perceived as emotional and to be incorrectly diagnosed with psychological rather than somatic disorders. So when you think about gender stereotypes, women are more associated with emotionality. And as a result, when you look at symptoms and you have a woman who was a patient, then we are more biased towards the fact that it's a woman, so it's psychosomatic rather than somatic. And it's also linked with the teaching. So are we kind of fueling the knowledge of our students that they can be gender biased when they do their treatments? Another example, physicians who exhibit gender-based attitudes are less likely to recommend women with the same symptoms as men for cardiovascular testing, because also when you think about, for example, some cardiovascular diseases, most of us, including women, they think that these are mostly men who are suffering from cardiovascular challenges rather than women themselves, which is not true. So this is an example of the teaching material and being aware of the fact that how do we teach and what do we teach and what are giving examples can have influence over the gender biases and the prevalence of it. But then when we think about those important recommendations, overall, please have a look at these that are mentioned in our output, and I will briefly talk about all of them. So first of all, when you think about gender-sensitive competences, it's a thing that we need to develop during teaching. So when you are an educator or you're a teacher yourself, you are responsible for sharing some elements of the knowledge and the gender bias yourself. So, and then it also comes with the diversity inclusion training, how you run your courses and classes. So in a way, as part of curriculum for different disciplines, so in social sciences, but also elsewhere, the ability to be inclusive and diverse as a teacher would be a very important part of our curriculum. For example, in PhD schools, and this is something that we do at University of Gdańsk, we do get this training to our students so that when they will be teachers in the future, and researchers, of course, as well, if they choose this career, they will have the sensitivity. And then when you talk about content, I'm giving you examples of that anatomy books, then the content of the course needs to also be formed in the lines of diversity inclusion. Then the moment when we conduct the course, but also when we evaluate the course, it's also very important and relevant. So let us look at some examples. Let's first, again, start with a little interaction. So have a look at those, at the questions here. There are two questions and there are two figures. It's actually a math test. It also measures of intelligence, sorry. So when you look at them here, sorry, just need to come back to it. When you look at them here, this is something that I also do when I teach teachers. I ask them to look at this task and try to do it as fast as possible. On purpose, I showed you the answers because I don't want to stress our group too much. But the thing is that when you do this test, I ask my participants to write the answer in chat, or they can simply say they're ready, right? So imagine a situation, you are in a group of people, you are studying psychology, you're studying sociology, you can also study other disciplines, you can be also pedagogist, and you're being asked this question, and in this group there are also women and men together. And we are asking them to answer and give the answer if it's ready, and we're waiting for it. And the thing is that when you are looking at those questions and you have different biases in your head, and for example, you're a woman, very often, or a person who is not associated with mathematical skills, very often we feel some emotions accumulating. And then, of course, I show the answers and people can check if they're right or no. So in the first one was A and the second one was B. But the thing is that we need to grab by the horns the emotions that are happening when I'm thinking and looking around. Oh, everybody's raising their hands, or they're saying they're ready, they know the answers, and I don't. And especially if you're a person who doesn't feel that you are, let's say, talented in maths, and usually that concerns girls, for example, then you may to think that people like me are not doing well in this, and others look at me and they know I do not belong in here. So these are the little things that can happen in you if you are in the course or in the material that you think that you will not be that good at it. And there are two important phenomena we as educators need to be familiar with. So one of them is stereotype threats, and the other one is imposter syndrome, which are very much strongly interconnected. So stereotype threat is this moment where there's this bias I have, for example, about maths, or for example, being a scientist, or for example, doing very sophisticated statistical analysis, and I'm a girl. Then I can feel, well, we girls are not good at stats, are not good at analysis, or are not good in maths, are not good in academia. So as a result, I'm kind of consuming some of my cognitive skills to deal with it, and I lose my performance and my potential. But also fueling imposter syndrome because I feel I need to do more than the others. And the beauty of teaching and creating a very inclusive class and studying environment, if it's your master's students or your PhD students or BA students, is that they can feel they really belong. And there are very many ways how to do it. So first of all, we need to be aware that we as teachers, we are responsible for creating a certain working environment and studying environment that people can feel that, yes, it's okay not to know. It's okay to make failures. So one of the things I definitely do as an educator, I do talk about this lack of fit. So I do mention this phenomena as existing, that it's there in the academia, and lack of fit is this moment where people feel that this is not their discipline, they don't feel they belong, because maybe I'm not from a big city. I'm a student who just came from a smaller countryside, and I'm going to study in this class environment, and others are from wealthier surroundings, or I'm a girl and there are mostly boys, or I'm a boy and there's like girls around me. This lack of fit is really very important to be aware about. We need to be aware about. And secondly, what I also mentioned when I do the instructors, for teachers, I mentioned that there's this bias, the way we perceive and present each other to others. And there's this element of recommendation for letters for women, which are very often shorter, less detailed, and less success focused. And we're, for example, asked to write application letters and recommendation letters for ourselves or for others. We do make those mistakes. And also, when we look at application letters written by female students, they're also less favorably assessed. So that's why it's very important to create an environment when we are aware of this, but then we establish a context. So that at every class that I teach, but also at every group that I manage, we do establish a contact, we agree upon certain things. So for example, one of those rules you can see here, this picture with drinks, it's called Tabasco to the drink. It's about sharing, that everybody in this room is an expert in something. And it's amazing we can share different expertise. And the diversity is so amazing in this group that I'm asking everybody to engage and add something, because this course, this teaching and their expertise, their opinions, their ideas are very important. And this course is about, it's adding all together, shaking it well. So this knowledge is ready to use after the course, after the class, but also they need to know that they are the authors of this content and they have influence over it. Secondly, you see this picture that actually the snapshot of one of the contracts I'm using. There is a horse, and it's a little metaphor here as well. So we don't kick horses in our class during our lessons, because there is a moment when you don't have influence over things, and it's okay. The biggest influence you have over you. So make sure that you make everything possible, that you are ready, you are engaged, because this is where the energy comes from. Let's not waste energies on focusing what others say, what others do. You are yourself, you compare yourself to yourself, and you are developing yourself and your talents in this class. Those little shapes and colorful silhouettes as the symbol of equality in my class, that every opinion counts and everybody has something to say, and we equally value all the statements and opinions of any kind, and as long as they're respectful to everybody. And then this S stands for safety, and the little picture of the dragon is the element of the contract I use, which is linked to my experience. My dad is a geographer, my mom as well. They met at the geography contests, by the way. And he told me that when I was little, that he was showing me the maps, and he said that at the edges of the old maps, Chinese maps, there was a statement saying, this is where the map finished. This is where only the dragons live. So I also encourage people in my class to meet the dragons, because this is where we leave the safety zones and we're experimenting with new opinions and new ideas. And we also learned that something we assumed is true may not be. So it's also the element of our ability to face the unexpected. And these are the little elements I introduce in any class I teach, in any lecture I do at the very beginning, just to fuel this element of equality and inclusion. We also talk about listening to each other, etc. But also those are important values that I want to perform and want to align with in the class as well. And then I also ask my students if they want to add anything that would make them feel at home and safe. We talk about bringing food and speaking different languages, etc. But this is like they co-author the class. And in a way, it's like a sense of empowerment that we build for such contract at the beginning of every lecture or workshops we run. This is about group management. So gender-sensitive teaching is about group management and creating the right atmosphere in the class. Secondly, teaching visuals. And this is something that, I did, Magda as well, we did our learning and experiencing different ways we can be more gender aware in our lectures. So this is a slide from my lecture on acculturation. I do cross-cultural psychology, and one of the lectures I do is about measuring acculturation. So acculturation is this moment where we meet different cultural contexts, we meet the dragons, so we are in a different country. And here in this lecture, I talk about different ways to measure acculturation. I present different tools and methods, and I do talk about researchers. So I could talk about two main researchers in the field of acculturation, which is Frans van de Veer and also John Barry, two men. But I also do mention other women, also women from other countries, not only from the weird type of the world, so Western educated, industrialist, democratic, rich countries, but I also talk about other women who are amazing, so John Tsai, Colleen Ward, and Saba Safdar, who are coming from different cultural origins, and they're also women. So I make sure that there are pictures of different genders in my class. I also mentioned wonderful non-binary individuals who are also amazing researchers in psychology. So I make sure that they're visible. And also the problem is with teaching that we also have names. And there's a strong bias in psychology, which is proven that names are associated with fame. And usually masculine names are associated with more fame. So that's why presenting names and surnames is very important, because then we can really see the presence and representation of women across different disciplines. Takes time to find the pictures and implement them in our lectures, but then I got the feedback from many students saying like, this is cool because we can personalize the knowledge and also see that there's an amazing number of both genders, different genders figures in academia as well. So this is about visuals. Secondly, the language. And again, this is like coming out from our experience, like different things can be presented in textbooks and also the way we speak. And you have some examples here. And there are good examples and not so good examples. And I will let you look at these for a second. And I hope that you will pick the good ones. There's also one which is not that good and one which is good. So I let you look at it together with me. And I hope you will find your answers here. As I said, they all come from our experience. So you can say mankind has always been innovative as part of your lecture, or you can say men and women have always been innovative. So to present both genders in that regard. Then when you look at the blue one here, we are talking about somebody in our close surrounding, the cute new employee, the new girl in the office, or the new project manager. So again, talking about the function. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our seminar, or everyone welcome to our annual seminar. Each student must submit his paper by Friday or their paper by Friday. Probably you guess that here in terms of language, it's a powerful tool of fueling certain, again, visibility of different genders. And again, I'm going to just show you the right answers, but you know it already. So men and women, the new project manager, everyone, and there, just to show it's not only about gender binary, but also gender non-binary perspective can be taken into consideration. But also, it's about how you address your students. And a little example, especially concerning gendered language, but also our identities. So one of the important elements of anybody's identity is a name. And we value our names so much. And probably those of you who are traveling across different countries, but also work in intercultural environments, you know that sometimes names can be tricky. And here you have some examples of my name being misspelled different ways. So I'm Natasza, and I like the Polish spelling of it, which you can see on my name tag on Zoom. But people are very creative in that regard. So usually it's also very important. And what I do in my class, I ask students to pronounce their names for me, and then I learn it with them. They also sometimes have name tags, and they help each other to pronounce their names because we're working in a cross-cultural setting. So it's very important here as well. And also sometimes we want to be inclusive, and we're saying, for example, well, I will not pronounce your name because I don't want to misspell it or mispronounce it. So then you can simply ask and practice, because this is also a little signal we are sending. I do value your identity, and I want to treat you the way you want to be treated. And also sometimes if you are able to ask students for your pronouns, you can also ask for the pronouns at the very beginning, again, to acknowledge that gender is not only binary, it's a fluid concept, and in that way we're also inclusive of everybody in our teaching room as such. So this is about language. And finally, when we talk about gender sensitive teaching, it's also getting feedback from our students. So here it's an example of one of the 1-2 questions in the course evaluation we are willing to ask our students. So it's about confirming that our sensitivity is first of all visible and useful and done in a right way. And here come some examples of it. So the content of the course, does it apply to the standards of gender sensitivity? Do you feel it's part of the course and the curriculum? And you probably feel the magic of it, because if we're evaluated ourselves upon those lines, we do prepare our students to be really aware of those lines of gender sensitivity as well. So is the promoter, coach, tutor, teacher fitting the standards of gender sensitivity? Have you felt that your diverse opinion was encouraged and included during the discussions presented in the course? And usually the scale is from 1 to 5. And has the academic teacher, tutor, promoter presented all genders' perspective during the course? And it's like, if I make a little disclaimer here, this is also part that Magda was mentioning when we talk about research. Very often, at least describing our samples and who are the samples of our research is very important here, because very often we end up just reporting women and men samples, but also we do collect data about non-binary participants. It's also very important to mention that they were also part of our samples. Very often it's probably we'll have this discussion maybe with this group, that it's sometimes statistically, especially in quantitative data collection, maybe hard to do proper statistical analysis, but then in qualitative data analysis, it's possible. So it's very important to reach out for the literature, which is not only focusing on, for example, one gender or two genders, but we are reaching out for more intersectional approaches to present materials and content and research, also including the data coming not only from binary participants, but non-binary participants. So that's why all genders perspective is so important and valid in that aspect as well. And then sensitive language. Again, you're, as I see in our participants list, we're coming from different countries. Some countries have gender neutral language, some countries have not. And then it's also a beautiful situation in some of the institutions currently in Poland that they are implementing gender-aware language. So when we are speaking in our class, Polish is very gender not neutral language. So I do welcome female and male students and non-binary students as well. So I do acknowledge the fact that gender is fluid. And at the beginning, probably for those of us who are not familiar with the gender non-binary language, might be a bit, process of thinking, and we need to think what we're doing, but it really comes with blood and it's simply natural. And then I also feel that I'm addressing everybody in my course, so that language is a really powerful tool we need to be aware about, especially when we have the declination in our languages, which is also very important, but we're also curious with Magda about your experience with those. So actually asking students about it and then asking for their ideas and how schools can be more inclusive and gender aware is also an important part of the work. And of course, we're in let's say, a wave which is going towards hopefully more gender aware and sensitive working environments, but still sometimes what we do in our course, we do have this moment that we look at different textbooks and different research articles. And we also have this discussion about whether the paper or the research could be done in a more gender-aware and sensitive way. And it's especially working very well for PhD students who are also, as most of us, struggling with applications for grant fundings and writing their grant proposals. And then they also become more aware as researchers. So in the teaching phase, you are very much planting all those little elements and triggers so that they can think how they can make their research funding and research proposals more gender aware. That not only concern then when I was reviewing different research proposals, from the fact that I'm going to say that my research team is going to consist of both women and men, and we're going to take this non-binary perspective, but that we are able to show how much our hypothesis and research question very much aware of the differences of the experience of women and men. And there is also one very important element that we mentioned also in our guidelines. So here you have a link to the Mind the Jobs wonderful project where we collect amazing outputs, and one of them is the guidelines on plan actions for gendering research and teaching. We also mentioned the fact that there's this important balance that we need to meet, and when we do gender awareness trainings, and we want to be sensitive to this, because sometimes when we promote gender perspective, we think that it's all about women and men and making sure that women and men are present, but sometimes that can lead to potential maximization of differences. So that we need to be aware of the fact that it's not about maximizing the differences, but it's about being aware that gender is a category that changes the world of individuals and needs to be acknowledged, but also needs to be acknowledged that the very existence of gender is causing trouble for both women and men. So we are also mentioning this perspective in our guidelines as well. So I hope that you can download it and have a look at it together with us. We have 6 minutes to 3, and unless Magda wants to add something, we're really curious about your experience as teachers. Maybe you also have other examples. Maybe you have other experience, which is, as I said before, we have learned our lessons from our failures and challenges. So it's like a lesson learned, but maybe you have your own lessons learned. We gave you the hints to the materials. So I will stop sharing. We can also share it again later. But we're looking for your comments.
And we encourage you also to share your stories, because we know that sometimes when hearing to also for us to read some good practices or some stories was like, okay, I was doing mistakes during my life and now how to just change myself or to start over. It is also the beauty of the science that many data are really fresh. So it's like kind of progress and development that we now know how the stereotypes work, or for example, we know more about the influence of language, or we do know more about diversity. So this is also good, and I think we always implemented that the scientific facts are changing. So like 20 years ago, maybe we were no aware of many things. So it's never a bad moment to start over. So also with sharing the failures and sharing like stories that showed how I switched into be more sensitive are also welcome. So our eyes and ears are open. We also have a look on chat, and you can use like raising hand, and please turn on camera if you want, and we wait for questions.